Morning, everybody. It's Friday. So that means after I've finished and we finish the Q&A, you can all go home. I feel like a teacher sending everybody home, but there we go. Anyway, as Amber said, there'll be a Q&A at the end. Please don't put your questions for me in the chat, simply because I'm a bloke and I don't really do multitasking and I'll get terribly confused and tied up. Having said that, if some do creep through into the chat, what I'm going to do is I'll try and pick them up once this is all finished. And also once this is finished, I'm going to be sending a little fact sheet across to Small Business Britain as well that will go out following this webinar, and there'll be some useful hints, tips, there'll be some links on there, some SEO types, well, not really secrets, but tools, and hopefully you'll find useful. So let's crack on, shall we? Without further ado, before we really get into the meat of search engine optimization, I really want to make a point about digital marketing, and that the reality of it is that it's a marathon, and the longer you work at it and the harder you work at it, the better it will work for your business. There are very, very few quick wins. The quick wins are the ones you pay for. Google ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, all of those advertising stuff. The stuff that you can get up and running within half an hour if you really work hard at it and you've got a handle on what you're doing. But if you're doing paid advertising, I do recommend that you keep your eye on it, because it is very, very difficult, very easy, to allow it to run away from you. And I do quite a bit within my role is helping businesses with their digital marketing. And I've been brought into a number of businesses over the years where they've just realized that either their digital marketing isn't working for them, or the costs are running away from them. And that's simply because they've not stayed on top of managing it. So you don't necessarily need somebody to manage it for you, provided you're managing it yourself and keeping your eye on where the money's going. So very, very few quick wins. Now, I'm sure most of you have a broad idea of what SEO or search engine optimization is, this mystic, magical, dark arts that people talk about. And for those of you that aren't, it's really simple. It's the stuff that you do to your website to make it easier to find, because that's the goal. You know, there is no real mysticism. The goal is to make your website easier to find by the people that are looking for the things you do and the stuff that you sell. And that's it. Now, the art is in what you do. And as Amber said, I've been doing SEO since, I guess, about 2001. And I've seen loads of trends come and go. And I've heard loads of comments about people saying, oh, my God, you know, in this era of social media, of Facebook and TikTok and Insta and everything else, surely SEO is dead. Now, if SEO was dead, I wouldn't have a business. The two are actually complementary. Just to put some numbers behind that, 80% of us actually use search engines when we're looking for something. We might do the social questions first. You know, oh, I'm looking for a new digital camera. I'm looking for a new hairdryer, whatever it might be. What have you got? Do you like it? How much did you pay? Would you buy it again? But once you narrow it down, you then start using search engines to find what it is that you want to buy. And of all of us that use search engines, 90% of us use Google. And in fact, it's higher than 90%. I'm quite conservative there. Globally, this is how the search engine market share looks like. You know, you would almost think there weren't any competitors. But Bing still around, Yahoo, there's other ones that work in the West. There's Ecosia, which is particularly focused on people who have an eye on the environment, because Ecosia plant quite a few trees as people do their searches. If you're targeting other countries, then you need to be aware of Baidu, which is actually the #1 search engine in China, and Yandex, which is the #1 search engine in Russia, although I don't think we can do business in Russia currently, can we? So there's a lot of search engines around, and just need to keep your eye on what's going on. But as I said, I'll talk about Google an awful lot, because Google is really where the market's at. But there's a challenge. not all of us go beyond page 1 of search. And in fact, only about half of us ever go beyond the first page of the search results. And only 10% of us ever go beyond page 2. It's only people that are really, really doing some heavy research on something that ever make it onto page 3 and beyond, which actually makes page 3 a really great place to bury bad news. So that's why search engine optimization is important. It's about getting eyes on your page, and to get eyes on your page, you've got to be as far up in the search engine listings as you possibly can be. But there is a huge amount of competition. But top tip number 1 is actually very little to do with search engine optimization. Before I moved into doing digital stuff, I spent about 12, 15 years in retail. And for those of you that are in retail, you will know that it's very goal driven. So you will set your turnover targets, you will set your break-even targets. So you know how much you need to make for a year, and you can break that down by month, by week, and sometimes by day. If you've got a team of salespeople, you give them targets. But it's no good giving targets if you're not following up the results. And your website's no different. If you don't know where you're going, you'll never know that you've arrived. And so you need to be monitoring the performance of your website to understand how it's doing, not just in terms of the numbers of people that are coming to visit it, but what they're doing whilst they're there, how many pages they're looking at, how long they're spending on the site, what's the most popular pages, what are the least popular pages. And there is a really good, powerful tool to understand that. And for small businesses, the good news is, if you've not come across it before, it's actually free to use. And it's not free to use with loads of sophisticated tools missing unless you subscribe. It is free to use, full stop. Everything is out there for you to analyze. That makes Google Analytics quite complex, but spend some time to become familiar with the information that it's telling you, and you'll find out whether you're getting people to your website from the search engines, whether they're coming from socials, whether they're coming from your email marketing campaigns, because you really are doing email marketing campaigns, aren't you? Because you should be, because that's the best form of marketing you can do. And I'm talking about email lists that you build yourself, not email lists that you buy in. So Google Analytics will tell you how your visitors are using and interacting with your website. There is a sister tool called the Google Search Console, which will give you hints and tips feeding back to you from Google about what Google thinks about your website. So it's equally important and it's equally free. I'll talk a little bit more about the Search Console as we go along, but we're limited on time, so I won't go into any great depth. So top tip number 2. I wonder what you think that might be. It is simply about making it fast. It's interesting. I was chatting to Amber earlier about short form videos, TikTok, Yahoo Shorts and the like, and the fact that the internet appears to have robbed us of our attention span. And it genuinely has. Most people won't wait more than 3 seconds for a web page to open. So if your website takes longer than 3 seconds, you are going to be losing visitors and potential opportunities. So it's critical. And Google actually keeps an eye on website speed, because Google's view, having this understanding that we won't wait more than 3 seconds, Google's view is, why should it bother to promote websites that open slowly if it knows people aren't going to use them? So if you have a slow website, you're already hindering how well your site can perform in the search results. And there are many website speed search tools out there. When I'm doing a website evaluation, I actually run the website through 8 different tests to get a fair average. But Google have their own tests. They're pretty useful. And also within Google Analytics, there is a section that currently also advises you about the performance of every single page in your website. So you can use that. But equally importantly, or maybe more importantly, is when people land on your website, they need to get it in that quick, 0.2 of a second. If you cannot short and sharp communicate what it is that you do within that very brief window of time, then you're again going to lose visitors to your website. So it needs to be front and center, and keep it simple. So if I'm looking for widgets, I want to see a website that will sell me widgets. I don't want to see a carousel of pretty pictures sliding by that I've got to wait until to see whether any widgets actually appear in that carousel. So your site's got to be fast. It's got to be fast to open. And there is a school of thought that says that 3 seconds is now around about 2.5 seconds. See, I told you about robbing attention span, but getting it almost in a blink of an eye. So that's the first two. Next, we're going to look at these things called keywords. And keywords have been around since SEO was born, as I said, back in about 2001. And keywords and key phrases are simply the words and phrases that people type into their browser when they're looking for the things that they want and the things that you sell. And the art is to make sure that your keywords are in the places that the search engines examine, so that when somebody comes along and is doing a search, Google, Yahoo, Bing, whatever, can pick out the websites that relate to those searches and put them on the search results pages. So there we go. Keywords, the words that people type in. But how do you find your keywords? First of all, you've got to think like a customer. You've got to understand that the words that you might use internally for your business might not be the ones that people are using externally for your business. You've also got to think about the demographics of your customers. I can remember when my kids first told me that something was pants. I had to ask, what's pants? And I know this is going back, 5-8 years or so now. But you've got to understand the demographics of your audience and talk to them in an appropriate language. So people like me, old people, we use a different language to younger people. So understand who you're targeting so you can target your advertising, your Google, your search engines towards them. Then also you need to think laterally, because what other words might people use? You might be very surprised. And so you should have a brainstorming session, a mind sharing session. You should ask everybody. You should be asking clients and suppliers the simple questions like, if you were looking for me on the internet, what would you tap into search? And not just your brand, but what are the words and phrases that people use when they're looking for your products or your services? And then there are tools that are out there to help you. And as I said, there's a fact sheet that will come out following this that will not only give you a link to these slides, but it will also include links to these tools as well. So the Google Search Console, I mentioned that quite early. That will give you a list of keywords that people have used to find your site. And it will also tell you how many people have clicked on those keywords. So you begin to get a feel for what is popular. There's a free tool called Ubersuggest that takes it a stage further than the Google Search Console, where you put in some keywords and it gives you some alternatives, some other options. There's a website called Word Tracker. Although it's a subscription site, it has a free trial. It will also give you more in-depth evaluation of those keywords and key phrases. And probably the top tool is called SEMrush or SEMrush. The problem with SEMrush is it's very powerful. I think it only offers a 7-day free trial. So you need to make sure that during that free trial, you make maximum use of it, because once you're out of the free trial, it's really pretty expensive. So Ubersuggest, I'm not sponsored by Ubersuggest, but it is the tool that I use because of its power. So here we go. I put in SEO webinar. You need to make sure that you've got the language options right. So English United Kingdom rather than English USA. Click search. And it comes back with an overview, and it says for SEO webinar, there are on average 50 searches. The search volume is 50 searches a month. It's got an SEO difficulty of 74 out of 100. That really implies there's an awful lot of competition, and quite a bit of the competition is actually well optimized. Because if somebody's punting an SEO webinar, you would hope that they would understand SEO, and so their pages would be well optimized. If you're looking at doing Google Ads, the paid difficulty is only 31 out of 100, which kind of says there's some competition, but there's not a huge amount of competition. But there's probably not a lot of competition because on average, it's likely to cost you £8.37 per click. So it's an expensive market to be in. You also get a spread of how frequently that phrase has been used over 12 months. So you can see some peaks in May and peaks in January 2023 for searches for SEO webinar. And then you get some alternative suggestions that also reflect search volumes, the average amount that you're going to have to pay per click, the PD or paid difficulty, and the SD or search difficulty. And the SD is colored, so you can pick out the easy wins or the easier wins, because very little is easy in search engine optimization these days, unfortunately. And then having got your keyword list, and I use a spreadsheet because every single page on your website has to be uniquely optimized for the content on that page. So you need to put your keywords in your meta titles. I can't show you how to do that because that's going to be dependent on your content management system, whether you're one of the 43% that use WordPress, or whether you use Wix or Weebly or GoDaddy or Squarespace. They've all got the way that you can add these SEO elements in. If you have to go to the help pages, they'll be in there. But when you put keywords in your meta titles, which is the first bit of code that a search engine sees, that's what's on the top line, the blue line, when you look on a search results page. So in my meta title for my page about me, your Chief SEO Officer, Andy Poulton, that's where it comes up in the meta title. And why did I choose Chief SEO Officer? It's quite simple, because I wanted to create a page that I could optimize the earth out of and get it to #1 in Google. So then I can say, if you just Google Chief SEO Officer, then you should find me fairly easily. Each meta title should be between about 40 and 60 characters long. You can stretch it to 65, but if you make it any longer than that, it's wasted effort. The search engines are going to ignore it. And if you make it any shorter than about 35 characters, the search engines will feel that you've not put much attention into it and will ignore it likewise. So you need to be quite right. That gives you about space for 3 or 4 keywords or a key phrase. So you've got to work at it quite carefully. And as I said, each page has to be unique, because if you've got 3 products and you've got the same meta title on each product, how can Google direct people to the right page when Google wants to drop people off at the page that is most relevant to their search query? So if I searched for, I don't know, OLED TV on the John Lewis website, Google, Bing, Yahoo would like to take me to the directory page on the John Lewis website about OLED TVs, not to drop me off at the John Lewis homepage for me to have to find where that page is. Because by dropping me off at the right page, the most relevant page to my search, it builds, as a user, customer satisfaction with that search engine. And so they're likely to return and do more and more and more. The next element is putting keywords in this thing called your meta description. Google call the meta description the snippet. So if ever you hear somebody talking about the snippet, it also means the meta description. And it's the words in black that come up underneath the top line on the results pages. And it's a précis of the content of the website. The idea being is that keywords, when I'm searching for something, the keywords that I've searched on, if they're in the meta description, they're picked out in bold. So when our eye is scanning the page, because we don't really read web pages, when our eye is scanning the results pages, the bold text pulls that content out to us a little bit more. And from a Google perspective, if your results come up halfway up page 1, for example, and more people click on your site than they do the sites above you because your meta description is good, then Google will actually push your site up the results without you doing anything else, because Google views your page as being more relevant to people searching for that particular phrase. And as with the meta titles, you've got limits. You've got about 160 to 165 characters to play with. And when I say characters, that includes punctuation and spaces. You use on every page, because if you don't have a unique description on every page, Google in particular will make it up its own description. And I've seen some horrendous descriptions that Google has auto-created despite the use of artificial intelligence. And yeah, obviously each page needs to have its own meta description. So the larger your site, the longer it takes, but it is work that pays off. So now we've looked at the stuff that doesn't appear on the web page. So let's now look at the web page content. You need to distribute your keywords across your content in a variety of locations. So the top line, Chief SEO Officer Andy Poulton, that's in what's called a header tag, an H1 or an H2 tag. And text that is in an H1 or an H2 or an H3 tag is regarded as just a little bit more important than everything else. a little bit more relevant. Google uses the word relevance an awful lot. So you're looking at building the term relevant. So I've got Chief SEO Officer in my meta title, in my meta description, in my H1 tag, and also in the body content of the page. So why Chief SEO Officer? And you'll note that it's also in bold, because if you put keywords in bold, and just keywords, don't overuse it, but if you put your keywords in bold, again, that's a little bit more of an emphasis to the search engines. But not only that, when people are scanning the content with their eyes, bold text and bullet points break up the scanning process and the eye is drawn to them. So you put important topics or important points in bold, and if you've got a list, you use bullet points, because that draws the eye of the visitor to the content you really want them to pay attention to. But don't go mad with keywords in the content. You know, you'll see I've used it a couple of times. 2 or 3 times in the opening paragraph, or the opening couple of paragraphs, is where you should aim for. Don't go any more than that, because then it'll be oversaturated and people won't like reading it, and it'll just be terrible to read. And if content's terrible to read and scan, people again are going to switch off and they're going to go somewhere else. So we're going well. We're up to, gosh blimey, top tip number 7 now. And we're going to talk about images. Images are vital on a web page. They do so many things. First of all, they break up the text. Secondly, there are lots of people that prefer looking at pictures than reading words. So using the right images, they say your picture is worth 1,000 words, don't they? So if you're using images, you are helping people make sense of your content, but you can also support your SEO. If you take an image off your phone or off your camera, and my recommendation is that you use as many images that you've created as possible, provided they're of decent enough quality, simply because if you use stock images, then people are going to come across them on other websites. You know, I'm fed up of business websites where there are stock images of people meeting, of business people shaking hands, and you see them everywhere. Get your own pictures. But when you've generated your own pictures, don't settle for the name that your camera gives them. So like this one is, you know, this one's got a date on it. So 17th of the 5th, 2022. And then 13364. That doesn't tell a search engine anything. Change it. So in this case, I've changed it to Chief SEO Officer Andy Poulton. And I've separated the words with hyphens, because in that way, that makes sure that the search engines don't have to guess what words are in there. Yes, you can use spaces, and yes, you can use underscores, and yes, you can run them all together without spaces. But to a search engine, the results of those are that it's just alphabet soup, and they have to guess what the words are within that phrase. So separate them with hyphens. So what you're doing is instructing the search engines that these are the words that relate to the image. And if you use the same picture on a number of different pages, then by all means, give each picture a name that is relevant to the page that it's on to reinforce that SEO. The other thing about doing image optimization correctly is about 30% of Google users use Google Images to search by. So if you get your image file name correct, and we'll talk about the alternative attribute now, and get that with some keywords in it, and maybe you get some text quite close to the image using those same keywords, Google in particular will begin to associate those keywords with that picture. So if somebody does an image search, it improves the chances of your image featuring at the top of the image pages. But the alternative attribute, or the alt tag, it's a little bit of text that appears in some browsers when you put your cursor over an image. It's there so that if for some reason the image doesn't display, there can still be a brief description of the picture. But it is also there because there are, I think it's about 2 million registered blind people in the UK, and at least half of those are regular internet users. And they use software that converts the text on screen to speech that they hear. So they listen to the content. That software can't interpret what's in that image, but their text to speech converter can. So it can also read out a description of the picture. You've got about 100 characters to play with. So it needs to be descriptive of the image, but it also gives you an opportunity to build in some keywords again, because the search engines are very good at picking up keywords in alt tags. So every single picture needs to have one. Every single content management system makes it possible to add alternative attributes. And as I said, there is this compliance with the Equalities Act there as well. But don't panic. There are not offices full of tens or hundreds of civil servants scouring the web for alternative attributes, because well, there aren't enough civil servants to do that. But occasionally, where big sites get tripped up, they get taken to court under the Equalities Act, and they get penalized, and then everybody becomes a little bit more aware of alternative attributes. And then the focus has a look at, around more websites on the web. So that's your image attributes. So number 9 is content. Imagine you build your website. You built your website 3 years ago, and you've not done anything to it for 3 years. How is Google going to know that you're still trading? And it's not. And so what tends to happen is Google promotes competitors above your website. So your website just gets down and drifts down and down and down and down and down into the depths, and gets lost. I mean, we know what happens if you're on page 2 and certainly on page 3 and below. You may as well not bother. So by regularly adding fresh content, this is where blogs and news pages come into play, and case studies. You can regularly add fresh content. And I always recommend something at least once a month. You don't have to go more frequently than that, but if you aim for once a month, then you're not going to be doing too badly. I start off every year with a calendar of topics that I'm going to write about every month on my blog. And that means that I don't have to go thinking about topics, because most of us, we do the same thing day in, day out. We just do it for different people. So it's quite difficult to come up with stuff that is relevant and about our business. So I talk about things that are relevant in digital marketing and business security. But I have a blog calendar, and what I try to do is write a couple of paragraphs a week. So at the end of the month, instead of having to go, oh my God, I've got my blog to write, I think all I've actually got to do is pull all my writing together, edit it to make it easier to read, find some images because the images support the SEO, make sure I've got the keywords in there because blog content can be really, really well SEO'd for particular subjects, and then make it live. And I'm a big fan of create once, use many. So when I share my blog through the website, it also gets put out on my email newsletter, because I know that my email newsletter, the recipients tend not to visit my website regularly. I also share it through my social media. I'll share the whole thing through LinkedIn, because that's my social media platform of choice, because I'm business to business. I'll share it through LinkedIn. I'll share it through Twitter. I'll share it probably 3 or 4 times a month through Twitter, maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs at a time. I'll record it as a podcast, because again, it's another way of reaching people. Some people like to read stuff, some people like to watch video, and other people like the auditory sense, and they like to hear their content, perhaps whilst they're out walking or while they're working in a garage. So I'll share it through a podcast. And if I ever get my brain into gear, I'd share it as a video too, because video marketing is incredibly powerful. YouTube is the second most searched site on the internet. And if I had more time, I'd have more videos. Because also, if there is a YouTube video, and you can optimize videos in the same way that you can optimize websites, if there is a YouTube video that matches somebody's search results, that video will feature or could feature on page 1 of Google search. As an example, I often use fly fishing. Because really, if you want to learn fly fishing, it's quite a visual thing. And if you do a Google search for fly fishing, I would bet even now that the top 2 or 3 results are video clips, because that's how people use it. So bear that in mind. YouTube videos are very, very powerful. Now I'm going to run a short video. It's just going to give you a bit of background into how Google works. And the video is a little old now, and you'll know that it's old by the fact that it talks about Google Ads being on the right-hand side of the page, because we know now that Google Ads are only at the top and at the bottom of the page. But apart from that, everything else is still relevant. It's run by a guy called Matt Cutts, who used to be a senior engineer at Google, although he was taken on secondment by the US government for various IT security roles and was never let back out of the US government. So anyway, how Google works.
Hi, my name is Matt Cutts. I'm an engineer in the quality group at Google, and I'd like to talk today about what happens when you do a web search. The first thing to understand is that when you do a Google search, you aren't actually searching the web. At least as much of it as we can find. We do this with software programs called spiders. Spiders start by fetching a few web pages. Then they follow the links on those pages and fetch the pages they point to, and follow all the links on those pages and fetch the pages they link to, and so on, until we've indexed a pretty big chunk of the web, many billions of pages stored across thousands of machines. Now, suppose I want to know how fast a cheetah can run. I type in my search, say cheetah running speed, and hit return. Our software searches our index to find every page that includes those search terms. In this case, there are hundreds of thousands of possible results. How does Google decide which few documents I really want? By asking questions, more than 200 of them, like, how many times does this page contain your keywords? Do the words appear in the title, in the URL, directly adjacent? Does the page include synonyms for those words? Is this page from a quality website, or is it low quality, even spammy? What is this page's page rank? That's a formula invented by our founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, that rates a web page's importance by looking at how many outside links point to it and how important those links are. Finally, we combine all those factors together to produce each page's overall score and send you back your search results about half a second after you submit your search. At Google, we take our commitment to delivering useful and impartial search results very seriously. We don't ever accept payment to add a site to our index, update it more often, or improve its ranking. Let's take a look at my search results. Each entry includes a title, a URL, and a snippet of text to help me decide whether this page is what I'm looking for. I also see links to similar pages, Google's most recent stored version of that page, and related searches that I might want to try next. And sometimes, along the right and at the top, I'll see ads. We take our advertising business very seriously as well, both our commitment to deliver the best possible audience for advertisers and to strive to only show ads that you really want to see. We're very careful to distinguish your ads from regular search results. And we won't show you any ads at all if we can't find any that we think will help you find the information you're looking for, which in this case, the cheetah's top running speed is more than 60 miles an hour. Thanks for watching. I hope this made Google a little bit more understandable.
Now, I might have swapped microphones simply because the main one that I was using might have stopped working. And I've just picked up a question in the chat from Kezia Stewart. She says she'd love to know what recommendations on size and formats for images. I will be circulating after this a fairly detailed image guide in terms of image sizes, image file types, and how you can actually do the editing to get them there. So that will ultimately answer Kezia's question, and I'm getting feedback in my earpiece, so I'm moving my microphone. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. Right, so top tip number 10, backlinks. This is a little bit of a mystical area in search engines, but again, it doesn't have to be mystical. It's simply links from third-party websites that could bring people to yours. And in a really simple sense, Google views a backlink as a vote. And as with all good democratic societies, the more votes you have, the more popular your site must be. So the higher up in the search rankings you must go. But those backlinks have to come from websites that are relevant and of decent quality. I mentioned about the Search Console at the start. In the Search Console, there is a tool that you can see which sites are linking to yours. So you log in, you go to the links page, as you can see on the menu. There's a page that opens that shows you external links. Simply click more. That opens this page, and then click export, and you can download it as a spreadsheet. So you can then start working on it at your leisure. And this is how I work on it when I'm working with clients. This is the spreadsheet, or a sample of the spreadsheet. I add a column in so that when I'm working through it, I simply code them green, amber, and red. So red are those that are the sites you don't want links from. The green are the sites that are good, and the amber ones are the ones I refer back to my client, and I just simply say, why are you listed here, and are you happy with it? So you go through the links to make sure, as I said, that they're relevant, that they're trustworthy. Are they from decent quality sites, not clickbaity sites? And for those that are poor quality and you're not happy with, then there is a procedure to go through to remove them. And when you get the slides, the copy of the slides through, you can click on my guide and it will show you how you can remove links. I've just picked up a question from Rita about, is it possible to rank single pages for multiple key phrases? And the simple answer is no, it's not. There's been a bit of an explosion in single page websites recently where they are just one long page, and when you click the navigation button, it just jumps you down deeper in the page. Those sites are really, really difficult to optimize properly. It's far better to break everything out onto discrete pages. So just jumping back to backlinks for a little while, let's rattle through these. What you can also do is use this tool from SEOreviewtools.com. And what it will enable you to do, in where it says enter website URL, what you do is put your competitor's website in there. And you click the perform check, and the free backlink checker goes away, and it finds all of the backlinks that are linking to your competitors. And it brings them up in a list. And it is your job now to go through these sites simply to see whether there is an opportunity for you to get a link from that site to your website as well. It might be a website directory you've not come across. It might be a blog that takes guest content, or it might be a blog that accepts comments. But it gives you a way of tuning into some of the work that your competitors have done and maybe being able to capitalize on that. So, a good bit of competitor research there. So go away and do that one as well. Now, it's not the most exciting of jobs. So when I'm working with a client, I must admit, I do only tend to allow maybe half an hour a week when I'm doing my research, because it gets a bit tedious. You click, you go, nope, can't get one from there. You click back again, and the next one in the list, and the next one in the list, and the next one in the list. And the last thing you want to become is jaded, because then you don't go back to it. So rather do it little and often. There are some good web-based directories that you ought to be registered with, because one of the things that Google focuses on is, they call it NAP, name, address, and phone number. And the more places you put your name and address and phone number, and the more confirmation it gives Google, the happier they are with who you are. And don't forget, it's a UK legal requirement for a business to carry their trading address on the website. That's a UK legal requirement. Again, there aren't legions of civil servants checking out, but it is a legal requirement. Also, if you're a limited company, you have to put your limited company number and your registered address. If you're VAT registered, it also has to be on the website, and your website by law also has to have an email address, but the law doesn't require you to put a phone number there. So that's some legal points for you. If you're still awake after that little bit of legal talk, we'll crack on. Again, with those backlinks, with those directories, there'll be a complete list that comes out with my follow-on fact sheet. And let's just go through, in all the best chart styles now, my 10 top tips for SEO in 2023, starting with number 1, measuring your website performance. Start 2, make it faster. And why did I put that at number 2? Quite simply because you might have the best optimized website in the planet, but if it isn't fast and people don't stick when they visit it, your site's useless. It's like opening a supermarket and only half filling the shelves and then advertising that you've got some great deals. Understand your keywords. So use those keywords tools, use your connections, use your contacts to expand and ask those questions. Then you start building those keywords into your website. Put it in your meta title, because that's the first bit of code that a search engine sees. Put them in the meta description, so that helps sell your website in the search engine listings. Build them, weave them into your content so that they help reinforce the message to the search engines. and also reinforce the message to your site visitors. Then you go through your images and name images with keywords. That can be quite a long process. So again, take it steadily, but the more you do, the harder you work at it, the better it will get. Use your keywords and your alt tags. Regularly add fresh content. Try to look for something substantial once a month. Now, don't be dragged down the hole that says you've got to write 1,200 words per article. Because if I tell you you've got to write 1,200 words per article, you'll write something that's 450 words long and think, oh, Andy said it's got to be 1,200 words. So you'll pad it out and it'll read like a really limp piece of content because it'll have very little focus and people won't read it. Equally so, if you've written something that's 3,000 words long and you've got it in this mind that Andy says, oh, it's got to be 1,200, you will edit the life out of it and it will be equally useless. My only guide is that content is as long as it has to be to get the point across, but the longer it is, the better written it has to be. And finally, don't forget to build those backlinks. I mentioned NAP as Google's name, address, and phone number. They have some other acronyms they like to use. EEAT, which is expertise, authoritativeness, experience, and trustworthiness. This is how, certainly in content, you demonstrate to Google that you're good at what you do and you know what you're talking about and you're an authority on your business sector, because this will help Google understand what you do and will also give you some good SEO sort of complementary tactics from them. If you're in the finance sector, so banking, financial advice, mortgages, Google have a particular acronym for you. Oh, and the health sector too, YMYL, your money and your life. So you need to be talking accurately and you need to be on point with that. GMB is Google My Business. That's that little box of information that comes up on the right hand side. That's free to use. You need to go into your Google My Business profile and create and fill as many of the boxes as you possibly can, because the more that Google knows about your business, the more Google is going to understand about your business and the higher up the search rankings you're going to go. And then GA is simply Google Analytics and GSC is the Google Search Console. If you want to check backlinks through another tool, there is another tool called Moz. Again, there's a free trial. There are some free tools on there. For this site, this has, it's got 9,600 links coming into it from 2,100 websites, and it has a domain authority of 35. That's 35 out of 100. So that's pretty good going, actually. The higher that you get, obviously, the more powerful your site's going to be. But for a small business, getting a DA above about 40 is really hard. But it's a good measurement for websites. Some tools for analyzing your website. I'll talk a bit more about these in the handout. But Screaming Frogs SEO Spider is a good tool and it's free to use. I'm desperately clicking, waiting for my, here's my speed test tools that I come up. And again, you can link to all of these from here and you can test the speed of your website. I put them into a spreadsheet so that then at the bottom I create a speed average, which enables me to talk to my clients about whether we need to improve the speed or whether we've done some work on speed in the past. And remember that despite all this talk about search engine optimization, your website is for your clients, not for the search engines. The search engines are a means to an end. And if you can't get your site ranking easily in Google search, there are plenty of other marketing opportunities for you. So we've talked about video, talked about podcasts, talked about blogging. There's the social media too. So there's loads of opportunities, but always bear in mind that your site has to be client focused. And on that note, we're done. And I think we're going to open it up to questions and answers now.
Amazing. Andy, thank you so much. There was so much information in there. So just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. There's lots of thank yous in the chat for you. And I can see clappy hands. Okay, we have a lot of questions. I've been trying to control them as they've been coming in. So if it's okay with you, Andy, I'm going to fire away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, so first question is from Jason. He put in the chat, my Wix website has dropped from page 1 to page 3. I've updated everything, alt tags, new blogs, case studies, checked broken links, and it's made no difference. I'm thinking of changing to WordPress. What are your general thoughts for Jason here?
There's several things that I would do first. As I said, I would certainly go back and check my site speed. The other thing that I would do is check my backlinks, simply because if you have poor quality backlinks in there, you are going to get penalized by Google. And it might not be a backlink that you have created. There is it's a rather nasty thing called negative SEO. There's not a lot of it, thankfully, but what negative SEO means is that if I can't get my website to rank higher than my competitors, what can I do to knock my competitors' sites down? And if I register a competitor site with, I'm going to call it a toxic website, for want of a better term. If I register my competitor with a toxic website, that's going to impact them, and that's going to lead to a penalty from Google. So you need to go through and check your backlinks to make sure you are totally happy with the quality of all of those sites that are linking to yours. Break any links. Also bear in mind that when you're doing your SEO, it takes time for that SEO to have an impact. For a new site, it can take 4 or 5 months. For an existing site, it can be 2, 3, 4 weeks sometimes. So don't make a change and then jump to the conclusion it's not worked. You need to have a little bit of patience with this. Moving to WordPress, is it a good idea over Wix? Possibly. Wix sites are typically hosted in the United States. What that means is that when I'm tapping to look for a website and I click on a link to go to your website, the first thing that's got to happen is my browser has to make it all the way across the Atlantic to find the website, and it has to pull the data all the way back. So if your site is on the cusp of not being fast enough, that's really going to slow it down some too. Wix is pretty good for SEO. I mean, all of the content management platforms now are pretty good for SEO. WordPress, from an SEO perspective, probably has the most power, but it is more complicated than Wix. Everybody sells WordPress as simple, and it's not simple. Once you get inside it and understand it, it becomes okay to use.
Mm-hmm.
But would I swap away from Wix? I think I'd look on it as on a return on investment basis. And if it was purely for SEO, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably work hard to get everything working on that Wix site first, and then maybe feel that I've got to jump ship. But I don't have a definitive answer. I can't answer that one, unfortunately, particularly without actually looking at your site and coming up with some comments.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Andy, no, that was so informative. Thank you so much for all of your advice there for Jason. I've seen something in the chat about website speed. It's from Jenny. She said, how do you make your site faster? Because we've spoken a little bit about that.
It varies from, I mean, the challenge is it depends on what platform you're using to build your website on, for a start. The first thing you can do is make sure your images are all sensibly sized. And I don't think that any image really needs to be above about 60 kilobytes in size, no bigger than 100 KB at the maximum. And that's why I wrote a little ebook about image sizes. It mentions a bit of free image editing software for people that don't have any. It shows you through how you can use that image editing software to resize your images and how to save them to get the optimum size for your pictures. Because it's very simple to drag a photo off your phone or your camera and upload it to your website, but that photo is going to be huge, and that's really going to slow the site down. So the first place I would look is images. Then I would go and look at, if I had a WordPress website, I would look at all the plugins I've got, because every single plugin slows your site down by a fraction. So you need to carry out a plugin audit. Why is that plugin there? What is it doing for me? Do I need it? Is there another way of doing what it does? And if you think, well, I'm not sure, then disable the plugin and see if your site breaks. And if your site breaks, obviously turn the plugin back on again. But plugins are another area of slowing down. Also, most of the content management systems have code that you can't change, the stuff that is necessary to drive the website. You can't do anything at all about that. And if you find that, I'll take Wix as an example, you do everything you can to make your site fast, but it's the stuff that Wix needs to build the site that is slowing you down, then that might be a strong argument to move somewhere else, perhaps to WordPress. And if you do move to WordPress, make sure you go for hosting in the UK. It'll be a little bit more than sites hosted in the States, but it pays off with speed. Squarespace is pretty good as well, but I don't have a favorite web hosting platform at all. But yeah, site speed is important. As I said, images, and from a WordPress perspective, plugins is where I'd look first.
Right, that's really interesting to make sure it's hosted in the UK or whatever country you're based in, because I don't know, to me, I think the internet is just the internet. I wouldn't have thought you have to go over to the Atlantic and then come back again. So thank you so much for clearing that up. There's an interesting question from Liz here. She says, I received an email from Neil Patel today that was suggesting that Google is going to reduce the number of times that the spiders crawl the web, brackets, to reduce carbon emissions, close brackets. He said that this is going to affect SEO and that we need to get our house in order now before the bots slow down. What are your thoughts on this, Andy?
Okay. Yeah, I've got the same email. I haven't read it in any detail, so thank you for reading it for me. I can understand Google's logic. The data centers burn up huge amounts of energy because they're just full of computers. And not only do the servers need energy, but they also need to be kept relatively cool as well. Now, I won't go into all the techie stuff that's being done to do that. But if Google do decide that their crawlers are taking up a lot of energy, yeah, then reduction in crawling is a step that they can follow. The Search Console will tell you the frequency of crawler visits. And in fact, that's another reason for keeping fresh content up there, because typically a crawler, when it looks at your website, will probably look at maybe 10% of your pages every time it visits, 5 or 10%. So it could be at least 10 or 20 days for it to visit and spider every single page on your website. So if you change something, it could be 20 days or more before that change has an impact. If you keep adding fresh content to your website, what that does, that brings the crawlers back more frequently. So they'll be looking at 25 to 30% at each visit. And so theoretically, on a good day, if I post fresh content today, it's spidered within 3 days and becomes SEO active within that period of time. And I've actually, when I created my Chief SEO Officer page, that was coming up at #1 in Google search 2 days after I put it live. So it can happen. So what you need to do is make sure you're putting fresh content up there. And I'm not talking about making changes. I'm talking about genuine fresh content. Keep it to that regular monthly rhythm, because whatever then Google decides to do about slowing down the robots, it's still going to be paying more attention to your website. And that's about all we can do, because, you know, Google's a rule unto its own. It's, you know, it examines more than 200 elements of a web page when, you know, a spider takes the data back to the data center. And we only know of about 15 or 20 of those things. So the rest of it is commercially confidential to Google. So there's lots of stuff we will never, ever find out about. But if you play within the rules and follow Google's best practice, then you're going to stand the best chance you've got of getting the best results from Google.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy. You mentioned a little bit about content there, which I think is a nice segue into this question from Sony, who says, can you advise on a good amount of content on a product page and good practice? Okay,
I refer back to my previous statement, Milad. And my previous statement was, it's as long as it has to be. You know, there's lots of paid content. There's lots of product pages that have probably 50-word descriptions on there. And that's what needs to be, because if somebody says, oh my God, Andy says it's got to be 1,000 words, and you pad those 50 words out to be 1,000, you've got lots and lots of wasted words. It's effort that you've put in that nobody is going to read. On product pages, bullet points works really well because they're very easy to read. And as I said, they interrupt the scanning eye. I don't think anybody should set any limits on words, whether there should be too few or too many. It has to be enough to accurately describe the product. And you also have to bear in mind that we don't buy features, we don't buy things, we don't buy the fact that this whizzy thing does this, and this, and this. I'm taking my own business. You know, I do SEO, I do email marketing, I do video marketing, and I do social media, and I do Google ads, and blah-de-blah. But people don't buy that. What people buy is the fact that I will make a website easier to find. And that's the benefit. You know, you don't buy furniture polish because it's nice and waxy. You buy it because it makes your furniture nice and shiny and dust free. So you've got to get into that mind. I wrote a blog post a while ago on selling the sizzle, not the steak, which is an American phrase that's how you sell steak. You don't sell it by the fact that it's, oh, look, it's a lovely looking piece of steak on the butcher's shelf. No, you sell it because you're tapping into the auditory sense of it sizzling in the frying pan, the aroma that's coming off the frying pan as it's cooking, because that's what we buy into. You know, when we walk into a restaurant, you know, a lot of us will just sniff the air, and if you don't do it consciously, you do it subconsciously. That's the reason why most supermarkets, if they bake bread, take air from the bakery and they vent it over the front door. So you walk in and you smell fresh baking bread. You go, oh, that's lovely. And you go in the supermarket and you get drawn in. And the bakery's at the back. So if you want the bakery, you've got to go through all of their aisles of stock. And that's because that's what we're buying. We're buying the sizzle, not the steak.
I love that saying, buying the sizzle, not the steak. We'll hopefully include a link to your blog post, if that's okay with you, Andy, in the follow-up email, because I'm sure that'll be really interesting for people joining today. Okay, 2 more questions I'd like to throw your way, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
We've got 2 minutes left. So what is the difference between domain ranking and domain authority, and which one does Google use to rank sites?
Okay, I've just spotted a comment in the chat from Neil Coxon, who I think I've aged pretty well for 1,000 years, Neil, don't you? Anyway,
I was going to read that one out, but I thought I'd leave it.
Neil flagged up an error that said I'd been doing it since year 199. So anyway, okay, PageRank is a score that was dreamt up by Larry Page, who was the founder of Google, and it provides a score to every single website. It used to be publicly available, so we could judge how well our websites were doing, but they've decided to just suck it back into that commercially confidential bit. Any other score that you see, such as domain authority, is a guess. Nobody knows how PageRank is created within Google. There are elements of it that are based around the number of backlinks you've got coming in, but not only the number, but the quality of backlinks. So if you get a backlink from a high quality website, let's say you get a backlink from the BBC, one link from the BBC might trump 100 links from really poor quality websites. Domain authority is where various external SEO agencies have tried to guess how PageRank actually works, and they've cobbled their own score together. It's a good rough idea, but it's not accurate, and you will never find the accurate bit because, as I said, that's tucked away somewhere within the Google servers.
Amazing. Okay, and my last question for you, Andy, is does the name of the website massively affect its ranking?
No.
Okay.
It used to. I mean, lots of people used to try and get keywords into their URLs. And I've seen some horrible URLs. I've seen business-support-in-the-west as one, which, you know, great. It's good for getting the keywords in there. But when you're trying to talk about it on the telephone, it's an absolute nightmare. It has a small impact, but it's not particularly great. But what does have an impact is the longer your website and your domain name is around, the more trust Google gives it. So if you've got a domain name that you've had for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, whatever, or more, but it doesn't include a keyword in it, don't run away and register a new domain name, because you're going to lose all of the benefit and the trust of that establishment. And if you can't get a page ranking on your domain name by doing everything else, then really it's okay, let's look at other marketing methods. Let's not look at choosing the domain name.